what we're doing out at Pawsey, out of Western Australia. So they fire lasers into the atmosphere and get data back at over a terabyte a second, which is pretty neat stuff. And then object stores. So StorageGRID is kind of my favorite at the moment. It's got an awful lot of capabilities. And we're starting to see it really come into its own. So it's a technology that's really come of its own.
Yep. It's
been around for a while. Something IBM put together quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
And it seems to be that with AWS and the standardization around the S3 protocol, that object stores are really coming into their own and the use cases are expanding rapidly.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about those today. A little bit about me. My name is Phoebe. I am a cloud architect here at NetApp in the Sydney office. And my job is to talk about cloud, hybrid clouds, and talk to our customers about what they're doing in the cloud. Cloud. It is the word, right?
It is the word.
And StorageGRID is, as Ash mentioned, our hybrid cloud-ready object store. So,
marketing got involved in that, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. Well, what I like about StorageGRID is definitely it glues a lot of the pieces of our cloud data.
Well, it's an integral piece of the whole data fabric puzzle.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? We do data fabric in two ways. It's either through Snapmare or through S3.
Yeah.
And you can think of your StorageGRID almost like a data fabric in a box.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, what is object storage? For those of you on the line who haven't really done anything with object stores, why are they so important and why now?
Why now? I think a lot of the problem has been that a lot of the reasons now is we're getting to scale, right? We're running out of room in our filers. File systems have been around a long time and we've incrementally improved them, but there's a general principle around software design that you can incrementally improve something 5 or 6 times, and then you really need to redesign it.
Yep.
And the object store is really the way to do that. We're finding scale, the different sizes of the objects, the different types of media that are now getting involved, but also the distribution. We're finding that customers are distributing the same sets of files on a global basis. That has hassles as far as operational processes go, and then things like backups. So that's one of the really cool things about an object store is you don't need to back it up. Once it's in there, it's self-protecting, right? It's self-healing. It moves the data where you need it on a global basis so you can ingest it anywhere you like, right? And the data will migrate to where it's being used. So the admins don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, so I see you've got there the parking garage and the valet. Can you give us a bit of an explanation of how that relates to object storage?
So one of the, we always try and explain these things in metaphors, right? So
it works. I mean, analogies.
Analogies are great. Yeah. So we try and think of you parking your car at the airport, okay? So you'll drive around and try and find space in a number of different parking stations. If you've ever been to Sydney Airport, there's a few of those around, and there's not always a bit of the different space in the different parking places. So you've got to drive around, find a spot, find a level, find the parking station. So you can make that as an analogy to finding space on a file. Right, and then you've got directories and subdirectories.
So your parking spot is kind of like a file name with a long path, which could be the floor and the parking location and the colour. So
exactly right, yeah. And you have to remember that to get it back again. So when you come back again from your trip, right, you wander off to the parking station and then you've got to remember, what floor, what parking station.
Yeah, you've got to get through the directories, right? Just like you might have a really long file name and you've got to go to the top level directory and then work your way down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and in an object store,
it's just like giving it to the valet. So driving up to the Qantas valet, going, here are my keys, right? And he goes and parks the car. Yeah. You don't care where
he probably parks in somewhere like Parramatta or somewhere really far away where it's a lot cheaper than parking in Sydney.
Well, you would hope that, if you're coming back tomorrow that he doesn't park at Parramatta, right?
Get it back.
Come and get it back easier. But you do want to have that at least that tiering capability, right? Of being able to park it close or park it further away, depending on what space you've got.
Yeah.
So the valet, and the nice thing about the valet thing is that normally when you get your ticket, so you have the ticket has the number or the object ID of the car, right? But generally the valet will also write your name on it. So that's metadata about your car, who actually owns the car. So if you happen to lose your ticket because you don't know, this is my car parking ticket, you can go, please give me the car for Schroeder, and the valet attendant will find it, right, with the metadata. So it gives them 2 ways to find it, right? The other thing is we do in the next piece here, right, is how it actually helps you on a global basis, right? So you've given your car over at Sydney Airport and you're travelling off to inside in Vegas, okay? You land in Vegas Airport and you hand the car parking check to the valet there at Vegas, and he goes, "Here is your car, sir." Which would be really cool, right? But that's what happens in an object store.
Also hard to drive because you'd be on the wrong side of the car. And
yeah. There's obviously some of the issues with the car analogy, but it kind of works in a concept, right?
Sure.
You know, if you happen to go to England, let's say, it'd be better. So you want to do the European insight rather than the Australian insight.
Yeah.
But the car's there. But the other nice piece about this, right, with the next slide, right, is if you're gone for a long period of time, the valet is constantly monitoring your car. The way the object store is constantly reevaluating the data that is in the object and comparing it to the checksums and hashes it created when you ingested the object the first time.
So it's kind of healing objects if they get broken.
So you can identify that there's a problem and heal it.
Right.
Correct.
Cool.
Okay? So you don't need to do the backups. Right? And if you're thinking that an object store is going to be big, right, and we're talking hundreds of petabytes, potentially exabytes of data, right, you're not backing these puppies up. Right? There is no way this is going to work in any practical sense.
Right. So in an object store, you depend on the object store and its intelligence to create the durability around those objects so that you don't have to back them up.
Correct.
And you have multiple copies. Like you said, you've got one in Sydney and you've got one in potentially Las Vegas and probably one in Berlin as well because you're going to the inside there.
Yep.
So you have multiple copies of the object that are self-healing, or the grid will heal them in the event that there's an issue. And
polish up the car, make sure the tyres are pumped up, etc.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the NetApp object store, which is called StorageGRID, or StorageGRID Web Scale.
Yes, used to be called StorageGRID.
To be completely accurate.
Right, yes.
Can you tell me a bit about StorageGRID and how it's a little bit different to maybe other object stores out there?
So StorageGRID has been around probably the longest, I think it's the longest of every object store. So it's the most mature platform out there today, right? It was released in 2001. There have been various different iterations, but it was released into the North American healthcare market. So they're very particular about keeping data for certain periods of time, making sure that you can actually show that the X-rays and scans, etc., are the same as when you ingested them. There's nothing worse than an X-ray having a spot turn up that wasn't there to start with, or worse, a spot disappear that was there.
Yeah, so you can't really tamper those objects.
You have to make sure that the data is immutable once it hits the grid, right? Okay. So immutability is a key part of an object store, right, and a key part of StorageGRID, and we've demonstrated that, for the past 7, 10 years. Our biggest customer is actually a healthcare customer.
So StorageGRID's been around for almost 20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years. Wow. Yeah, 17 odd years. It's been around for a long time, which is actually the longest of any other object store out there. There's a lot of guys who've brought up object stores over the last couple of years, and they're definitely not as feature-rich as StorageGRID. Yeah,
well, I think the best-known object store out there at the moment would be AWS S3.
Correct.
They, created the S3 protocol.
Yes.
So is that the only way you can talk to a StorageGRID? Is it through S3 protocol?
No, you can talk to it via Swift, which is the OpenStack version of S3. Right. We also have NAS gateway devices, which allow you to talk it with SIFs or NFS. Mm-hmm. And we have actually a very extensive ecosystem that comes along with StorageGRID. And so we have partners that will let you talk to it via Apple FileShare protocol if you're still running that on your Mac, right? Or a bit of iSCSI if you really want to do that, right? So there's a number of different options, some of them from us, some of them from third parties.
Yeah, the other thing that I'm definitely seeing, and it'd be interesting to hear your take on it, Walter, is that there are a lot of applications out there that are writing, rather than writing to a file system, they're actually writing via S3, so they're expecting an object store on the other end. And then that must be to do with, knowing that they're going to scale out to huge numbers, or maybe their medical images.
I think it's a much easier paradigm, actually.
Yeah.
Right? So, doing programming at uni, it was a hard slog trying to find your file, right? You had to open up the directory structure and scan down and try and find all the files you need, right? Where in an object store, it's the simple puts and gets, right? And if you have an object ID, that's all you need.
Yeah, so it's very API-driven, isn't it?
Very API-driven, very minimalist in a web sense.
Yeah, well, software is eating the world, like they say.
Absolutely.
Developers are the new kingmakers.
The new kingmakers.
So to make it as easy as possible for them to consume the storage of the back end without really needing to worry about where it is in the world, right?
Correct. I mean, my kids don't want to program the way I programmed at uni, right?
Oh, nobody wants to program the way you program it. What was that go-to statement?
That's right. Fortran and Cobalt, no, you can forget it.
Yeah.
So as we said, it's the most mature product in the market space, right? One of the other key unique features about StorageGRID is the ILM policies.
Yeah,
our ability to reevaluate existing objects. So a lot of object stores you can set policies for. They will do checksums to make sure that the data hasn't changed, right? But once you've ingested it, that's it. You can't do anything else with the object, right? With StorageGRID, because we can reevaluate objects already in the grid, we can change policies, right? And that gives us a whole bunch of features and functions about moving the data, tiering the data, that any other object store cannot do.
Right. And do you have to press a button to reevaluate that, or is it constant in the background?
That's up to you to decide. In most cases, it will reevaluate it for you in the background.
Cool.
Right? But if you don't want it to do, you only want to do it on new ingesting objects, then we're good.
Yeah, cool. I want to dive into those ILMs, but the other two items that you've got here in the slide, unique things.
Because of the ILM policies and our ability to reevaluate the objects, that means we can do tiering. Now, tiering is really cool, right? Because we can do it in a number of different ways. So we have two different types of data protection, which is replication and erasure coding. They're just different tiers as far as the ILM policies are concerned, and we can move it from protection to erasure coded buckets, right? And we can change the erasure coding so it distributes it further around the globe or brings it back so we can reduce the number of copies. But we can also send it to tape and or cloud. So inside a single S3 bucket, the user is putting his data into the bucket. We can have it as replicated to start with, because we know that if he's just put it in, he's likely to want to use it again in the next little while, right? As the data ages, right, I can move it, to erasure coding, which gives me a bit better efficiency on storage, although it is a little bit slower because it's chopping up the data and distributing it on a global basis. So the retrieval means you need to bring it all back again. But I can do different types of erasure coding depending on the age of the actual asset. Now, if I take this into a media context, I can actually make this part of a media workflow, or any workflow for that matter, whether it's HPC or media. So I ingest the object, I do a little bit with it, but then the next step in the process is this, right? And if I metadata tag the object when I ingest it for the pieces of the workflow, then the grid will move the data closer to where it's actually going to be used in the next part of the workflow. Right, so if I'm doing a movie at the back of Broken Hill, let's say, right, I can use StorageGRID to ingest it in, say, Sydney. It can then go to Weta in New Zealand for a bit of CGI, right, go to Hong Kong because then it gets translated into Chinese, wander off to Bangalore because it's also going to get translated into Indian, right? And then I move it off into an Amazon cloud because I need to transcode it for the new iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10 that's turned up.
Right.
So all those pieces, it's a workflow to get from where I've created the content to the consumer actually consuming it.
Yeah, and that's kind of all automated through that ILM policy that you set up. So
correct. And the grid moves the data for you, right, to where it's being used.
So how does the grid know what data to, which object should go where?
So the grid has a database as part of it. It's a Cassandra-based database that we deploy as part of the grid, and it has knowledge of where all the objects are and the metadata about all the objects. So if you come in from a location that doesn't actually have your data, you can see the data, you can see the object is there, right? And the grid will get you the data as fast as it can, whatever is the fastest way to retrieve the object, depending on where in the world it happens to be. So you could ingest something in Sydney, fly to London, go, I want that object, right? And it will send you the object. But if you'd metadata tagged it to say, I will need it in London in a couple of days' time, the grid's already moved it to London for you.
Yeah, cool. So what other kind of metadata could you attach to an object?
you can attach anything you like. It's just phenomenally easy to do that with. So, let's do a media context again, right? I could put actor names, right? So I do, this is the latest Mike Myers movie, right? Or I know that, he's just done the latest Shrek thing, and so Mike Myers is a part of this movie as well, right? And, not wanting to wish Mike any harm, but Mike has an issue and dies, right? There's a car accident, Now,
hope you're not predicting.
Not predicting anything here, right? But that allows me to set a policy to say everything that has Mike Myers in it, please put it out to the edge of my network. Because I know that for the next 2 weeks, everyone's going to want to see Mike Myers.
And like a content delivery network, right?
Correct.
You could make intelligent decisions of who's going to be most likely to access something and therefore have it there and available for them.
Correct. And the other thing with StorageGRID is you can put link costs in, right? So you can tell it, or you can give it an indication of what the cheapest way is to get the data to the different locations that it needs to get the data.
Yeah, because network bandwidth is sometimes not cheap, right?
Not cheap, right? And sometimes you want to get it there quickly, and sometimes you don't care how long it takes to get you the data.
Yeah.
Right. So that's cool. I can just have it with different names for different SLAs. So maybe I have a gold, bronze, and a silver standard of SLA, and so I can tag the object with with metadata that indicates the SLA for the object. But I can also add system-style metadata rather than custom metadata. And the system metadata would be, I've ingested it in Sydney, and it's from this particular department or this particular customer. Right? So I know that, if the customer is moving cities, for instance, I can say everything that's tagged with customer X now needs to live in Melbourne rather than live in Sydney.
Awesome. Okay. So how do you, what does a grid look like? We talked a little bit about cool features that it does.
Do we want to go through a policy? We can well, no, let's show off the grid, right? We'll get to this in a sec. Sorry, guys. We're way down the track. So the grid looks like an object, right? Looks like a cloud.
The original cloud storage.
The original cloud storage, exactly right. So the grid kind of has a number of components to it inside the cloud. So you see a cloud, you see a set of interfaces, right? And we can go add different components to different data centers to make them as reliable or as capacity constrained as we need. So they don't need to be the same size. They're asynchronous in size. We can have a range of different storage in those places, including third-party storage. So if you've got pieces of isolated storage around the place, let's use those. I can then also add tape as a tier of storage or as a type of storage in data centers or in a particular data center. But I give you a single namespace across all of that. So as far and as wide as you want that to go, and StorageGRID will go to 16 sites. We can scale the grid independently at every site, and because it's software defined, we can create instances of the grid where we need them and then destroy them again later.
Right.
So we can pop it on and off as we like. We can also send data into a public cloud instance. So if Amazon or Azure or whoever else is giving you a really good rate on storage this week, use it. Right? We can tag the grid, we can tag objects in the grid, right, to say, if it's over a certain period of time, move it into the public cloud, right? And then we can decide whether it's Amazon or Azure later on. Still giving you that single namespace for everything. We see that where they're going to interface to it with S3 or Swift, all right, or applications, things like AltaVault, which we'll get to talk about later anyway, for people who haven't seen AltaVault. But if you've really got some old SIFs and NFS applications around, we have a bridge that handles that and actually converts it to an S3 object. That's probably one of the nice things to talk about too, is that object duality. Right?
What's that?
So object duality is where we have the ability that for every file we send, so every SIFT or NFS file, we create an S3 object. A number of other NAS bridges will convert the SIFT and NFS files and put it into an object blob with all the other SIFT and NFS files that you've used, right? Which means that the only way you can get that data back is back through that device. Because we've created object duality for every NFS file, I create an S3 object, I can actually now access the object via S3. I don't need NFS.
Cool. So that could mean, let's say I wanted to I have an application that's writing to file at the moment, writes to a CIF share.
Yep.
But if I put that CIF share onto the NAS bridge, I could then, when that application gets updated to the next version, which is S3 capable, it would just be able to, you know, you can take that NAS bridge out of the picture and just talk to those objects.
Correct, and so you've done the migration already.
Wow.
Right, it's a much simpler process to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, seeing everything's moving towards this anyway, you know, to S3, it's a great thing to have in your kit bag.
Yeah, fantastic. Cool.
So then, you know, so we don't care about the applications and sites or protocols. We handle lots of those, you know, either through us or through the part of the ecosystem, right? And it's also multi-tenanted. So you can have buckets by different departments, by different customers, you know, the tenants, and they can handle policies and some administration themselves. So you can delegate some of that.
Cool. So tell me, what in your terms is a bucket?
So a bucket is, as kind of the visual gives you, is just a place to put stuff. So it's a container, and it can be variable size, can be the size of a jug, can be the size of a beer barrel. We can put just lots of liquid into it, and we don't necessarily care, right?
It's not like a volume where I have to go and create it and say, make this 100 gigabytes.
No.
It's just a space.
It's just a space, right? Yeah. We can put quotas on it these days if you want, but it's just a space that's supposed to be able to grow. Right? So you can put beach balls in it and sand or just water or whatever it is it needs to be. And that's because we don't care what the object is.
Yeah.
Right? We don't care what the type is.
Cool.
Right? And we can mix all those together, although water and sand may not be that much fun.
Water and sand, you'll end up with a bit of a sludgy mess there.
Sludgy mess.
And we don't do that with objects. No, we keep your objects safe and in one piece. Yeah. So yeah, like we said, we talk to the grid over RESTful APIs, including S3 or Swift, or through an application. So how does Ultivolt talk to the grid?
So Ultivolt talks to the grid. It provides NFS or CIFS mount points that the backup application can write to, and it then does the dedupe compression pieces and encryption pieces, and then puts it into the grid as an S3 blob. Yeah.
So even though it's similar in a sense of what the client would see as the NAS bridge, at the back, because it's encrypting that, you can't read anything.
Correct. It provides a very different set of use cases for different workflows.
Cool.
Right. So I wouldn't put a backup workflow through the NAS bridge.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's not really what it's designed to do.
Yeah. Well, you'd never need to access it as an object.
Correct.
So
you're always going to come back, to your backup blob. And you reread it through your Ultivolt.
Yeah, sure. And how would I go and get an object that I've put into the grid after I've? How do I retrieve objects? Is it just the same way as I've put them in?
Yeah. So you put them in, and when you put a new object into the grid, you get back an object ID.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right? So you just need to remember that ID somewhere.
Yeah.
If you're updating the object, we actually create another copy of the object. So we never let you modify the existing object. That's part of the immutability.
Right. So if I even if I rewrite the same object again,
yes,
I get a new object.
You get a new object and a new object ID.
Yeah. Okay. Do we keep multiple versions?
We have version control as well. Yep.
Yeah. So in this grid, in this picture here, you've got kind of 3 data sensors. What is let's start at one end. What's the smallest possible grid that you could set up?
So the smallest possible grid is a single site grid. Okay, which is cool. Great place to start. We need to have 3 appliances, right?
And that's because of Cassandra, right? Cassandra has a 3.
That's how we do it. It's replicating and protecting itself across 3 appliances. Although, when we talk appliances, they could be VMs as well, right? So storage node VMs.
Yeah. So really, the very smallest, just throwing this out there, you could have virtual machines accessing, existing storage, the data stores that you have, and that could be your starting point for a grid.
It could, and I probably wouldn't do that as a production grid, but definitely as a test dev grid.
And I hear that we now have a proof of concept that you can run in AWS as well.
That's true. Fire it up in Amazon and have a go.
And that's a single site, it's actually a single EC2 virtual machine as far as I know.
I think that's true, correct.
So
yep.
So that is from a proof of concept, being a bit of a hacker myself at home, and I don't have lots of infrastructure, I could just run up a grid in AWS and...
Yeah, go off to the marketplace, create yourself the grid, right? Remember to turn it off at the end because this isn't...
Well, yeah, that's the lesson everybody learns in cloud.
That's right.
We'll send out that link to the details about the AWS marketplace offering because that's really cool and it's a great way to try it out or to play at home for those of you with home labs.
A great way to do a POC too for any customers that are listening. That's a great way to get yourself into an object store and see what it's like and how different it might be or may not be for you.
Yeah, cool. And so let's go the other way. So you can grow out that grid to 2 data centers or 3 data centers.
Up to 16 at the moment.
Wow.
Right. There's no particular limit, but what we do is, as we start getting to petabytes in size, right, so our largest customer is the US Department of Veterans Affairs at 65 petabytes. Yeah, it's still 65. They've just bought themselves an upgrade, so that'll come up soon. But we basically just need to stay in front of our larger customer. Okay? So, because we really can't put 100 petabytes of disk on the floor somewhere and test it.
It gets hard to test.
It gets hard to test.
For engineering guys, right? Yeah.
Correct.
So how many objects could I store in that 65 petabyte grid through?
We're looking at 1 trillion objects at this point.
Okay, that's zeros that I can't even imagine. So.
That's a lot of objects, right?
Sure.
So yeah, so we allow you to grow. There's actually no software limit for any of these things. It really is just a testing limit, which is what I was trying to indicate before. Is that we're basically testing in front of the biggest customer to make sure that there is not going to be any problems. There's no architectural limits. We're looking at exabytes and exabytes of storage, right? And trillions of objects. Because if you think you're going to keep, some of the use cases for these things are about keeping data forever, right? So, if I'm a media customer, I'm going to keep Gone with the Wind forever, right? I'm going to keep Shrek forever, right? Whatever you think of those two movies, but you're going to keep them forever.
Somebody will like it.
Someone will want to see them. And so when your great-grandchildren want to see this, they go back and get it and go see the movie. It's just there available for them.
And those objects could be, because, it's all variable sizes, right? So those objects could be really small, or they could be the full
really
movie.
Big, correct.
Yeah. So is there a minimum size object that we recommend?
We don't really want to go below, 4 or 8K object, right? But, we're up to 5 terabytes at the moment, and that's just, again, it's a soft limit. We really need to, we haven't found anybody.
Yeah, try storing a 5 terabyte file on your hard drive, right?
That's right. Try and do a couple of them.
The only way to do it in the future. Yeah. And then for multi-tenancy, what are some of the ways that you could multi-tenant? Multi-tenancy to me is where we've got service providers, or even within an IT department where you have different business units who you don't want to interact with, you don't want playing with each other's objects. How do you do multi-tenancy for those guys?
So there's a couple of different ways of doing tenancy. So you can have, public buckets and then access control, so they can't see anything from each other, through to, segregated resources. So it's really up to you. It's a very flexible arrangement, whichever way you want to make that work.
And when you say public bucket, is that like, could I put my website on a grid?
You can put your website on a grid.
In S3,
absolutely.
So it sounds like it would be a reasonable
thing to do.
Use case, yeah.
So you could have, your polyglot style web pages these days, which access Cassandra or different S3 objects, and so the movie clip that you've got can come off your S3 bucket.
Yeah. And because of that, you could put multiple types of applications. We have backup applications there and NAS applications, but basically it's saying that you can put anything in the grid that you can share all those, but you can also segregate them through tenancy so that they can't actually interfere with each other.
Correct.
And put different ILM policies on it based on metadata tagging.
Yeah, or encrypt it if that's what you want to do with the object inside the grid.
How does encryption work with the object?
So you can define encryption at a couple of levels, so you can have that every object is encrypted when it hits the grid, or you can define it on a per object basis.
Yeah. And is that's just a minor performance hit, I imagine, for every object that gets encrypted or decrypted?
In general, yeah. Right. You can also compress it too if that's really what you want to do. Yeah. But we do find that a lot of applications are doing the compression piece before it hits the grid, because that saves network bandwidth.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess with media as well, they're not things that necessarily
well, inherently the protocol is already a compressed protocol, so you don't need to redo that piece. So
some of these Well, actually, one thing I guess, well, you still got that slide up, is that public cloud access. That sounds really interesting. How would what would be a case in which I would use the public cloud as a another grid?
So currently the public cloud is used as a tier of storage. Right? So that gives me the ability to have effectively a DR copy in someone else's place. Okay? So I could have my grid set up, and then I have a copy of stuff that I think is really important inside AWS, right? Which I know I'll never touch. Right? The only reason I'll ever touch it is because for some reason the object inside my grid has got corrupted, and so to fix it, it will go and get the good copy out of AWS. All right? Coming up, and this is, you can't tell anybody this, right? But we're going to be doing cross-region replication on the next release of StorageGRID. Which is
giving it away. So the next version of StorageGRID is version 11.
Version 11.0. So we've come off the 10.0 releases. We're moving into version 11 because what we're doing in these new releases is so so far forward from what we were doing in 10 that we really needed to give it a new release.
Yeah, that's when you go up a full version, a full number, because there's something new and exciting.
Something new and exciting, right?
Yeah.
So the cross-region replication allows us to actually look like an Amazon region to Amazon.
Nice.
Right? So if you sit about and think about that for a minute, that means that I can actually send whole objects to another grid, right? And the grid can put some other grid, and it can protect it whatever way it needs to protect it. So I'm taking it out of, effectively taking it out of my namespace. I can then perform some action on it. So if we take another media context, I could actually, do some transcode in the AWS grid as a region, and then bring it back into my grid.
Cool. Is there anything else in version 11 that you can give away?
Well, the notification stuff's pretty cool.
Notifications. So those are the S3 notifications, right?
That's right. So we're always, being completely up to date and completely aligned with the S3 protocol from Amazon.
Yeah.
So any of the features that they bring up, we will have exactly the same thing.
Well, it's good they've done it. They've kind of created the template, so we can just do what they do and then do more.
Do more on-site, on-prem, or in hybrid cloud, because that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
But the other piece
of that, true hybrid cloud, right? Where you're literally going, well, I've got my own S3 cloud on-premise, or maybe in a colo data center, and then I'm also in AWS doing stuff in the same.
So I get to use the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Right? As much as I want to have on-prem for, let's say, speed purposes, right, it's much easier to access. The latency is lower if I have it on-prem, right? Or I put it in the cloud because, it might be cheaper. There's other services that they offer that, they can perform in my data. Right?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about latency as well and network. What kind of network do you need for the grid? Because it looks like, if I'm sending data around in the grid, do I need a 10 gig? Do I need a 100 gigabyte network? What is it that
well, the fastest network you want to give us will always take, right? But it's an IP network, so we don't really care other than that.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some restrictions that for things like erasure coding, we need to have 100 millisecond round trip or 100 milliseconds latency on those things.
These days, 100 milliseconds.
It's nothing. You get around the world to that, right?
At least from Sydney to Perth, right?
Yeah, correct. Well, that's the other side of the world, isn't it? Sorry, guys. But if I'm doing a replication, then it doesn't matter. It could be an 600 baud dial-up line, although I wouldn't try and do that for the movie, but you could.
Yeah, so one of the cool use cases for StorageGRID that I am really excited about, because, I have a good background with ONTAP, which is our primary storage platform, is Fabric Pool. So you can use a StorageGRID as the cloud tier of a Fabric Pool, and that's actually one of the places where it
becomes the backing store for all your different environments, which again is moving towards that whole data fabric story we've been talking about for a while.
Yeah.
We've been fleshing that out as we go along. So if I've got a solid firebox, I can back it up to my StorageGRID. If I've got a FAS, I can use Fabric Pools to copy the snapshots off the StorageGRID. And we've just released eSeries Centricity Cloud Connector, which allows me to do the same thing. So I can do snapshots in E-Series, and I can send those snapshots off to StorageGRID.
I like this. Everything just ends up on StorageGRID. Everything goes there.
Everything can go there, right? So it becomes like your data lake, for want of a better term, right? But the grid is then doing the protection of the data for you, right? So we have, it's doing the self-healing, it's doing the replication, all based on policy. Cool.
I guess the other cool destination for StorageGRID would be our cloud control product. So
cloud control can send it off to StorageGRID too.
StorageGRID is bring your own storage. That's really neat.
So for everyone on the phone, cloud control is where we actually take data out of Office 365, right?
Yeah, that's really cool.
So that's one thing I didn't understand is Office 365 is actually not responsible for backing your data up.
Yeah, I could tell you all about that on a different session. We're talking about StorageGRID today.
Yeah, I know. But that's why you want to do this, right? Other people might be thinking, I'll put it in Office 365 and I don't need to care.
Yeah, well, right? I mean, it kind of gives you a lot of options with StorageGRID. You can put it anywhere you like. You can put it in Sydney. You could put it on the other side of the world. You could put it in S3, right? Wanted to, but yeah, it's got that geographical democracy. You can really put it in. But I guess that kind of leads into something like, how would I use a StorageGRID in something like GDPR? So GDPR is the new privacy regulations coming out of the EU, and I mean, everybody is kind of up in arms. We had Sheila Fitzpatrick, our Chief Privacy Officer. I don't know if you got to talk to her, but she was so, yeah, kind of scared a whole bunch of people, but also got us thinking about other ways of doing things. How could I use a StorageGRID to help me with addressing my GDPR requirements?
So the GDPR is obviously related to European countries and European citizens. One of the things you could do when you ingest objects from European countries or European citizens is actually tag them that way. So you can actually create a metadata tag saying European citizen or GDPR compliant, right? And so when they come up back to you and say you need to forget me, right, because that's what they can do as part of GDPR, right? And you can then go to either an S3 bucket you've created for GDPR workloads, which lives in Europe, right? Because that's where it lives. So you can have your grid, some of it in Australia and some of it in Europe. And the people that are tagged or metadata tagged as GDPR, relates to them, you can then perform the appropriate actions on that. So it becomes a much easier thing to manage than trying to look for, Fred blogs out of Germany.
Yeah, finding all of his medical records or something.
Well, that's right, and all the other Fred blogs that come up, and you've got to figure out which is that the Fred blogs I'm actually looking for. Yeah,
so you just tag him with some metadata.
Yep.
Everybody should just put a little chip under your skin and just tag it.
Well, we do that for our dogs. Anyway.
Let's not go there. So what are some of the other use cases for an object store?
So we can probably go through a couple of them now. So we have a very large partner ecosystem that's formed around StorageGRID because of its history and heritage. So obviously the most common use case is using StorageGRID for backup.
Cheap and deep.
Cheap and deep, right? So we use our UltraVault product for backup software that doesn't understand S3 yet. A number of the backup vendors are actually adding S3 into their base software, so UltraVault may not be needed going forwards, right? But today it provides DG encryption and compression of the data, and then we'll send it to a StorageGRID bucket for you. So regardless of your piece of software, as long as it can talk CIFS or NFS, it can talk to the UltraVault.
So I would, like for something like a Commvault, for example, what was previously a disk library, I could just point it at the UltraVault, and that would be my new destination, and then it would end up in S3. So I could basically be a cloud backup provider.
Very simply and easily, correct. And allow, so if you're providing this as a service, it becomes a very easy thing to put, an UltraVault either as an appliance or as a VM on the customer site, right? And his backup now goes to that, right? Rather than any tape libraries he may have had on site. So obviously S3 is S3, right? So, while we talk about UltraVault, competitors' products can also, because they comply to the S3 standard, can also talk to StorageGRID.
I'm sure we have a rule against putting competitor products.
I'm sure we probably do, and so it's gone completely now. Wipe it from your brain. No one uses that product anyway, I'm sure.
Not biased.
Not biased at all,
not
right?
Biased, yeah.
The other piece of the puzzle here is that, you know, don't restrict yourself to open systems and Windows-style environments. The mainframe has been around for a long time, has very valuable corporate data on it, has lots of history. It's 30 or 40 years worth of company history in mainframe. So its data needs to be protected, and we find that people are having a hard time integrating mainframe data and open systems data, and potentially storage could be one of the places you could do that with. So you can use, it can become a backup destination or just a file repository destination. So so you can just send it as a file, as a data file, the entire database, so whether it's BSAM, ISAM, DB2, you can go straight into StorageGRID, and then you could use an analytic product to compare it with all your open system stuff. Healthcare, so, you know, StorageGRID came out of the healthcare marketplace. So we have, you know, PAC systems, MRI scans, X-rays, etc., that need to get stored. It's not quite here in Oz yet, but, you know, you have HIPAA out of the US, which mandates you keep the healthcare records for the patient, for the life of the patient, plus 20 years. Right, and considering we're all probably going to live to about 100 these days, that means you need to keep your data for 120 years. The thing of just the infrastructure hassle of doing that, right? But the ability to show that the data we've ingested, the X-ray we've ingested, hasn't changed over the last 120 years is a hugely valuable resource. Sync and share. So everyone likes Dropbox. I'm sure everyone likes Dropbox.
Oh, I love Dropbox.
So we can do that type of solution as well. Right, with StorageGRID, we have the ability to have, you know, endpoint protection for devices with something like Satera. I don't think Satera is the only one we have, but it's just, you know, we picked an example. The nice thing about Satera, though, is the ability to have a secure file share. So normally if I'm putting things into a Dropbox, I've got a copy on my laptop when I'm reading it back again, right? So with this, I can actually share files, but I can only share files for, you know, a certain period of time or while the sharing application is happening, and there's actually no remnant of the artifact on the device I read it from. Right? So that allows a huge bunch of advantages in that space. Again, you know, not wanting to harp on the media environment, but I could actually do an ad. So, you know, a media company could be doing an ad for a customer, right? And normally they would put it on a USB to show them what it looks like to start with. Right, he now has a copy and can go off to some other agency and get it done cheaper, potentially. Not that anyone does that.
Not anyone does that, no.
But with this type of environment, we could actually share it securely, so he can't copy it. There's no remnant on the customer's premises.
Cool.
Which is really cool, right? Archive, HSM. I'm sure everyone remembers HSM. It's not just me, is it? This is where we actually take data that is aged, that is not being accessed as frequently, and move it to a tier of storage where that's, you know, a little bit more relevant to the access patterns of the data, right? So we can scan NFS and SIFs and out points, find files that match certain policies, and then copy or move them, right? So moving means they disappear out of that particular file point, that NAS mount point, and put them into StorageGRID. So I can create them as stuffed or stubless environments. Stealth is a similar style feature, but it is really there for pulling blobs out of SharePoints. So SharePoints kind of get filled with a whole bunch of stuff they really shouldn't be filled with, right? Get very, very big over time, and Stealth will find those and will actually create pointers into storage for those blobs. Right. A whole bunch of database vendors do that now as well. So if you're looking at, you know, Oracle 12c, it'll actually can take out blobs and give them S3 pointers
as well.
To
S3, yeah.
Yep. So again, everything's moving to S3. Lots of media use cases, part of the workflow. The MAMs and DAMs in a media environment can actually control StorageGRID because it's a completely API-driven environment.
Right. So even if I had an application that I wrote myself, I could use a Python library like Photo3 or something like that, and then write out to StorageGRID.
Absolutely.
Whatever I want to do.
Everything you want to, and anything that lives on the Amazon marketplace, you can use for StorageGRID.
So, I mean, these are cool use cases. I'm pretty interested myself in dev tools and DevOps.
Right.
Are there any good stories for a StorageGRID aside from maybe an application that writes to S3? So maybe my build management, artifact management.
So JFrog, for instance, right?
Yeah, maybe that's the one I was thinking about.
So yeah, absolutely.
I'm really excited about it.
You know, it becomes a much easier way to manage and collaborate with a whole bunch of different developers.
Yeah.
Right. So you can glue these things together. There's a whole bunch of DevOps tools that allow you to use, you know, through both S3, etc. Right. And it becomes that global repository. It becomes a much easier way to create the application.
Yeah, we could send data around the world and have different build images in different locations.
Right, and then you go metadata tags.
Or even glance images for OpenStack, right? That's another, I guess.
Well, that was one of the ththings I found interesting. IDC recently did a survey on applications people were putting into object stores, and yeah, VDI was one of them. VDI.
Not what I was. When I said cheap and deep a couple of minutes ago, I was not thinking video.
Not what I would normally have thought of.
But there you go. It can run on a StorageGRID.
Yes, and then we can do, you know, cloud control, as we talked about, protecting your data out of Office 365 into Amazon or to StorageGRID. Hadoop integrates as well. So if you're looking at some form of analytics, give you a nice big data lake to play with. You can send it out of Hadoop or read it straight with Hadoop. We actually have companion products which will automatically tier out of Hadoop clusters straight into StorageGRID.
Nice.
So our ASAP environment actually uses that. So ASAP is our phone home core logging facility. So we get a regular report out of all our arrays and we store them into ASAP looking for trends and patterns. Yep. And failures, and currently that's about 25 petabytes in size. Right? So that needs a large amount of storage, and we actually 23 petabytes of that Hadoop cluster lives on StorageGRID.
Cool. Place to put it.
Splunk, everyone loves Splunk. Splunk is the darling of a whole bunch of business these days. It has some great ways for correlation and visualization, but it does have some things it doesn't do well, and where it needs to expand out to other analytics programs. So Splunk can also send it to StorageGRID and or Hadoop. And then, law enforcement and body-worn cameras with our partners are people like Fujitsu.
Yeah.
Gives us the ability, to have chain of evidence, secure video.
Could I stream video into StorageGRID?
You can stream video into StorageGRID.
Stream video out of StorageGRID?
Stream video out of StorageGRID.
So is there does StorageGRID have a preference read or write?
Not particularly. I mean, because it scales out linearly, right, and it pulls data out of lots of different nodes to actually create the stream, it either in or out is fine.
Can I ask, do you have any performance statistics on StorageGRID that you can share? Like how fast is it?
How fast is it? So a fully fledged StorageGRID, we're looking at 50 gigs a second.
Whoa, okay.
Okay, so it's no slouch. Right.
So even though you could have it as that backup repository, so, backup archive, which doesn't really matter when it gets there, as long as it gets there. And at the same time, on the same grid, I could run these media streaming applications.
Correct. And in a real operational sense, I probably wouldn't be running all the streams out of StorageGRID.
Sure.
Right. I would push it up into an Akamai service or something like that, some other CDN environment. But I could be doing lots of different streams at the same time. I could have cloud-based DVRs, for instance, right, where everything's recording, individuals are recording different football games, etc., and putting them into the grid.
How do I add more performance to the grid?
So you just add more nodes. It scales linearly like that, right? So every node will give you the incremental performance of that particular node and capacity as well. How are we going for time? Ooh, we're close.
We're doing really well. I love these use cases. It's just so much variety of things that you could potentially do on the grid. It's what I really like about it.
And it's turning out to be more all the time. I'm running across use cases that people go, oh, that's great. I've never thought of that.
Well, the mainframe backup one, I honestly, cloud storage and mainframes were not two words that I would expect to hear in the same sentence. So, yeah, there's some really cool
We don't want to exclude them from it. No, it's true, right? It's all-encompassing. The cloud is really changing the way businesses work.
Right. How do I find out more about StorageGRID?
Well, if you're going off to Insight, right, I will recommend everyone does that. Yeah. Go and talk to the StorageGRID team out there on the floor, right? We have great stands. We'll have all of our technical guys and a bunch of the engineering guys there ready to go. You're going to Insight in Vegas, aren't you, Phoebe?
I will be at Insight in Vegas.
So you can, have a look for Phoebe.
I'm loud and I wear cool shirts.
That's right.
Yeah, there are a couple of great sessions. I had a quick look earlier. There's some intro sessions, so intros to the StorageGRID 11, so maybe we didn't give it away too much, and how to deliver true hybrid clouds using StorageGRID Web Scale and AWS. Some really good deep dive sessions about performance and sizing of a StorageGRID, and also about how to automate deployments. That's a really cool one, and I highly recommend if you are at Insight, if you don't get to go to the session because you have something conflicting, have a chat about it. It's about how to literally deploy StorageGRID completely unattended through, through scripting and Ansible, I think. There's fabric pool sessions, of course,
yes.
And there's actually...
There'll be cloud control sessions.
There will be cloud control sessions, and one of our customers, ASCIT, who have a grid of their own in Australia, will be speaking.
Yep, be talking about their experiences with the grid, what they've seen, how it's been useful for them and their business.
So if you don't see me at that session,
go talk to Andrew.
Have a chat to the guys there. That sounds great.
So we've got a couple of minutes for some chats. If there's anyone else would like to ask some questions.
If there's any questions.
Any questions?
Well, okay, here's a question for you. What is your favourite feature about StorageGRID 11 that's coming out?
My favourite feature? I think the cross-region replication is going to give me so many more use cases to play with. Right? That's just unbelievable, right? The new ILM policies around being able to have regions, right, again, is going to let me use so many more use cases in it.
Yeah, I feel like, sometimes I haven't even thought about the things that you could potentially do with a grid.
I'm still coming to grips with a lot of the use cases we can do today. and the boys keep adding more and more features. I mean, the 6-month cadence on StorageGRID software is phenomenal. Yeah,
I'm really excited about the UI. So in 10.3, they updated the UI with administration and tenant management, and in 10.4 they updated it again, and then in 11 they're updating it again, and they're adding more things, making it more usable, making it user-friendly. I mean, that's one of the things that's really
searchable. And we didn't talk about searchable.
We didn't talk about search.
No. So we get an elastic search interface into StorageGRID in 11, right? So we can actually look for specific objects.
Yeah. Well, that's
specific features.
So we've got a couple of questions on the line. How good is NASBridge as an interim mechanism while you get your user base thinking about data ingest/egress using objects? Our users are still unfamiliar for the most part with S3, and there's a learning curve there. I hear you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great stepping stone, right? It's not there for very high performance, so we're looking at about 250 megs a second per NASBridge. So it's a great way to get data in and out of the grid, and it's a great stepping stone.
And we have, like you mentioned, the partner ecosystem with lots of different options for presenting file shares or presenting volumes out of the grid.
Right. So you don't just need you're right. You don't just need the NASBridge, but the NASBridge is nice because you can do just a bunch of different VMs.
Yeah.
Right.
And the performance of the NASBridge, I know initially, when we first came out with this idea of having a SIS gateway thing for the StorageGRID, the performance wasn't the greatest. Is that improving?
I mean, that's improving every release.
Yeah.
Right.
So they're definitely putting work into
getting it, up there, and I think the release in 11 will be faster again.
Cool. Second question here: the disks used in StorageGRID, are they all cheap and deep SATA 7.2K hard drives?
No, we can use tape and cloud. But yeah, generally it's cheap and deep disk, right? We can have some SSDs if that's what you would like. So we don't particularly mandate what the type of storage is underneath StorageGRID. It's really there to match whatever your workload is. But having said that, most of what we see is cheap and deep.
Well, it makes sense for a huge data store.
Correct, and mostly it's an archive backup repository, right? So putting, SSDs in that environment is just nonsensical.
I have heard as well that adding SSDs doesn't really increase the performance that as much as maybe adding another storage.
Correct,
right?
exactly, yeah. But, if you're doing very metadata-heavy workloads, then you can put the SSDs in to help with that.
Okay. Does NetApp have any automated mechanisms to move data from FAS file systems into StorageGRID and in the other direction using ILM?
So we talked about fabric pools, which allows us to move the snapshots, but then we now have a product called CloudSync, which is available for you off the Amazon Marketplace.
Oh, yes, I love CloudSync. Oh, I can't believe I didn't mention it.
I know, I'm surprised we didn't.
So CloudSync is NFS or CIFS to
S3.
To S3.
Correct.
So that can be a StorageGRID or an AWS bucket.
Correct. And then for on-premise, so if you don't want to go through, a cloud, SaaS environment, we have XCP. Right, or CloudSync on site.
And if you haven't listened to the Tech on Tap podcast about XCP, get on it because it is fantastic.
It's an awesome product.
Very cool.
It does a very good job. So effectively that again is CIFS or NFS to S3 migrations.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of those coming up where customers have those applications that kind of get updated and modernized.
Well, that's part of the whole data fabric story. That we keep, the data that is being used heavily and constantly on FAS or E-Series or even SolidFire, right? And then we move the data as it ages and its access patterns, drop off to an S3 bucket.
Is there a way to search through objects via the NAS bridge? I'm not sure about this one.
I mean, it's just an NFS mount point, so things like find would work.
Find, LS,
that kind of thing would work.
Sure, yeah. So it comes across as a file share, right?
Correct.
So, yeah. Is the I/O mostly sequential in object storage?
No, not necessarily. The writes are obviously sequential.
Well, I imagine to get that throughput that you mentioned earlier, 50.
Oh, I see, 50 gigs.
That would probably be a sequential workload, right? That would make sense.
Right. So generally we have a couple of different numbers. So there's a throughput number, and there's an objects per second number. So we understand that some of the stuff will be very, very random, right? And that's why we distribute it across as many pieces or elements of the StorageGRID as we can to give you great random performance as well as good sequential performance.
Yeah, and I think that session at Insight about performance and sizing is going to be a really great one. So if you are there, because it's so flexible, you really want to, what do you want to do with it? How big do you want to make it?
It is, and that's one of the nice things about it, and one of the dramas about it is it's very, very flexible.
Yeah, well, software, it is software. That's fantastic. So we are at the top of the hour, so thank you all very much for coming. This session will be recorded. You will get the slides. Ash, I don't know if you had anything else to add, but thank you all. And if you've got any questions, do reach out. I'm more than happy to answer anything offline.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye.